So, what happens when a government's biggest threat isn't the opposition, but its own party? Well, that's exactly what's unfolding right now in the UK. We're going to dive into a massive internal crisis that's rocking the Labour Party, all because of some brand new and very controversial immigration policies. All right, let's just get straight to the jaw-dropping number here. We're talking about more than 100 Labour MPs in open revolt against their own government. I mean, do the math. That's about a quarter of the entire party in Parliament. This isn't just a handful of people making noise, you know? This is a huge, significant chunk of the party standing up and saying no. And look, when you see a rebellion this big happening, especially behind closed doors, it's never just about the surface issue. It's like seeing cracks appear on the ground. You know there's something big moving underneath. It's a clear signal of a much deeper political storm brewing. So the real question is, what is actually going on? Well, it all boils down to a pretty bold private challenge. You've got this letter, right, signed by all those MPs, over 100 of them, and they sent it directly to the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. And get this, they did it just hours before she was scheduled to give a huge speech defending these very same policies. Talk about a power move. The strategy here is really smart, and you've got to see why. First off, making it a private letter makes it feel more serious, less like a public stunt. It's a coordinated, direct message sent at the most high-pressure moment possible. But here's what's really crucial: the people who signed it. It wasn't just the usual critics from the party's left wing. Nope. This included centrists, the MPs who almost always back the leadership. That tells you the discomfort with this policy is deep, it's widespread, and it cuts right to the very heart of the Labour Party. Okay, so what are these new rules that are causing such an uproar? Well, at the very center of all this controversy is a new tiered system for immigration. Basically, the government's proposing a new way to get permanent residency, but it's all based on how much you earn. So if you're a high earner, pulling in over £125,000, you could get residency in just 3 years. Pretty quick. Standard workers, you're looking at a 10-year wait. But here's the kicker. For care workers, who are earning maybe around £30,000, that wait could be 15 years. Yeah, 15. The difference is just staggering, and it really makes you ask, how is the government deciding who's valuable? But hold on, because this is the part that has so many people, especially these MPs, absolutely furious. The rule changes would be retroactive. What does that mean? It means they'd apply to migrants who are already here in the UK. People who came here, played by the rules, and started building their lives based on one set of promises, only to have the goalposts moved on them. It's like pulling the rug out from under them. Let's just put this into perspective. Imagine you're a care worker. You arrived in the UK back in 2022 on the health and care visa. You were told, and you planned for, applying for residency in 2027, 5 years. Manageable, right? But now, under these new proposals, suddenly that date isn't 2027 anymore. It's 2037, a whole decade later. Just imagine that. Planning your kids' schooling, your life, everything, around a 5-year plan. And overnight, it gets tripled. It's no wonder it feels like the ground is just collapsing beneath them. And just a quick clarification so we're all on the same page. The thing everyone is fighting for here is called indefinite leave to remain, or ILR for short. It's basically the UK's term for permanent residency. It's the golden ticket, really. It lets you live, work, and study here without any restrictions on your time. It's the key that unlocks a stable, permanent life in the country. So you can see why this is so explosive. But what are the core arguments these rebelling MPs are making? Well, it goes way beyond just the timelines. This is really about fundamental questions of fairness and some really serious ethical and practical problems. Okay, so their main points are this. First, it's about broken promises. You can't just change the rules on people who are already here. Second, it creates this hierarchy of value, where a banker is seen as more important than a care worker who's looking after your elderly relatives. Third, for refugees, it's even worse. They could be stuck in what critics are calling permanent uncertainty for up to 20 years. And finally, there's the bigger picture, a real fear that this damages the UK's reputation on the world stage. Who's going to want to come here if they think the rules could change on a whim? So that brings up the big question, right? Why would the Labour government even float a policy that they knew would be so unpopular with their own MPs? Well, to get that, you have to understand the incredible political pressure they're facing from all sides. It's a classic political balancing act. You can think of it like they're fighting a war on two fronts. On one side, you have the heart and soul of the Labor Party, its progressive values, supporting migrants, fighting for fairness, protecting workers. But on the other front, there's this huge wave of public pressure to get tougher on immigration, to control the borders. That pressure is fueled by high migration numbers and the rise of populist parties like Reform UK. So the leadership is trying to walk this incredibly fine line right down the middle, trying not to get blown up by either side. And that brings us to the government's official argument. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is basically saying, look, we have to show the public we have a grip on the system. The fear is that if a mainstream party like Labor doesn't look like it's in control, voters will just abandon them for more extreme options. So, in their view, this tough stance is actually necessary to maintain public trust and keep politics from veering too far to the right. Okay, so this is where it all comes to a head. The big question is, what happens next? You've got over 100 MPs ready to fight this. Can they actually force the government to back down? Let's break down the power, the politics, and how this could all play out in Parliament. Now, how this works in Parliament is a bit tricky. The Home Secretary can actually push through some of these changes without needing a full vote. But other parts will have to go before Parliament, and that's where the rebels get their chance to challenge it. But, and this is a huge but, you have to look at the numbers. Labor has a giant majority, so even if you have 100 or more rebels, the government could probably still win the vote. Especially when you think about it, the opposition, the conservatives, they're not exactly going to vote against tougher immigration rules, are they? So we're left with a fundamental question at the heart of this whole thing. Will this massive rebellion actually achieve its goal? Can it really force the government's hand and make them find some sort of compromise, a more balanced policy that their own party can get behind? Or do we see the alternative and arguably more damaging outcome, where the rebellion makes a lot of noise, embarrasses the leadership, but ultimately fails to stop the policy? You're left with a weakened government, deep divisions in the party, and the controversial law on the books anyway. And that leads to the final, biggest question, the one that looks to the future. Is this just a fight over one bad policy, a temporary flare-up? Or are we watching the very first cracks appear in a much deeper, more fundamental split within the Labor Party about what it even stands for anymore? That is the real cliffhanger here.